Hey, thank you so much for joining us at our Crosspoint Church podcast. Now, if you're new to our podcast or maybe new to our church in general, we're just a bunch of messed up people who don't have it all together, running after a heavenly leader who loves us and meets us right where we are. We hope this message encourages you, builds your faith, and strengthens your confidence as you continue down this journey of what it means to know and follow Jesus. Enjoy this message.
Who are you following? Everybody is following somebody or something. Put another way, everyone is a disciple. The question isn't, are you a disciple? It's who or what are you a disciple of? 2,000 years ago, a Hebrew rabbi by the name of Jesus made this invitation: come and follow me. He invited anyone and everyone to become his disciples or students in living. Over the last 2,000 years, millions of people have said yes to Jesus' invitation. It's changed not only their lives, but the course of human history, and it can do the same for you.
Well, hey, welcome to the Practicing the Way journey. Really excited to see you this weekend. My name's Curt, and if you're here for the first time, you may have just stepped into something amazing. We really believe these next 6 weeks are going to take us to new places. So if you're looking to start faith, maybe re-pick up with your faith, maybe just go to the next place. We are so excited you're here and hope you'll continue to connect with us. And let's make some noise for those joining us online this weekend. Really excited to have you join us from wherever you're tuning in from our city, state, nation, or world. My name's Curt. If we haven't met, and we are in week 2 of this journey, and the basic idea that we started off in week 1 was this idea that Jesus gives this open invitation for us to become a talmidim, which is really this idea of a student or a follower, or a better word for us would be apprentice. And so last week we looked at 3 goals, like in 2025, what does it look like to apprentice under the life of Jesus? And we said basically it's to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, and to do what he did. Meaning, if you want to experience more of the joy, the peace, the hope, you look at his life, you go, wait, I want more of those characteristics in my life, then it doesn't just happen. It happens when we begin to adopt the template of the lifestyle of Jesus. Now, you might go, okay, what in the world does that mean? Well, let me give you a picture, like a modern day picture of this. Every single day after school, right across from this campus we're in right now, there's a ginormous high school across the street, and there's this like orchestrated event that happens at 3 o'clock in the afternoon where about 3,500, 3,700 students all disperse from that school and go out across the community, and it is like magic. I mean, if you've ever been on here outside our campus, you're like, wow, the orchestration of getting all these people to different places is absolutely amazing. About 3:15 in the afternoon, there's another event that happens, especially in the fall. You'll see this herd of antelope, basically, runners, that will leave the school parking lot. It's known as the HSC cross country team. And there's like 50 of them. And like every day, they're always out there in their like ridiculously little tight Nike things. You know, the things that like, they look like a Nike model, basically. You know, they're like super thin, strong, lean, and they run like a gazelle, like a herd of gazelles leaving the parking lot over there. And I don't know if you've ever seen like a real runner run. Like they don't run, they prance, right? Like they like prance like a gazelle. I mean, when I run at best like during a week, 15, 16 miles, and I don't run like a gazelle. I'm more like a horse. It's like, you know, like a clippity-cloppity horse. But I tell you what, when I see those runners go out in the afternoon, I can see them from the commons from my office. I mean, it's like antelope going off into the field. And you know, I just look at that and I'm like, man, I want to run like that. I want to do that right there. And then I think about the lifestyle that goes with that. And I go, you know, I just don't know that I want that, because like those people, I don't think they eat Chick-fil-A like during the middle of the day like we do sometimes. I think they're on a very strict diet. I think they have a very strict like sleep schedule. When they run, they don't just do a little bit when they want to because, you know, they have time. No, they run all the time. I know that because I used to have 2 runners that were on the team. And so like they don't run for maintenance, all right? And so like I don't really want that, right? I want the byproduct of what they produce, but I want the gazelle thing. But like getting up at 6 a.m. with a banana and a cup of water, going on like a long run at a 6-minute mile, I'm like, no, thank you. That's the last thing I want to do. And so it's kind of this way with anything in life. Like if you've ever known like a really, really good musician, I mean, somebody that just like, shreds the guitar, they're in this like amazing band. You're like, man, I want to play like that. You realize they don't just like show up and kind of play around a little bit. No, they have devoted their life to that thing. And so if you want that kind of life, we say, I want that, but we don't want to do the lifestyle. And the reality is, this is kind of simple but profound. Your life is the byproduct of your lifestyle. And so when I say lifestyle, I mean things like your rituals and your routines and what you spend your money on and what you spend your time on and, how you organize your day and your week and your year. To kind of use a business parlance, we'd say your system is perfectly designed to give you the results that you're currently experiencing. And so, when you look at your life, you have to go, okay, is the result that I'm getting, is that what I want? All right, is the fruit that I'm getting out of my life, joy, peace, hope, goodness, patience, are those things, are they being produced in the way that I want? Spiritually, in my apprenticeship to Jesus, is it good fruit, is it bad fruit? Because your system, whatever, order you've put that system together is designed to give you exactly what you're getting. So a few years ago, 3 years to be exact, I kind of hit a wall spiritually and even emotionally and physically, and especially in my discipleship with Jesus. And I grew up in a good home as a kid. My dad was a pastor, so I grew up in a pastor's home. I didn't plan to be a pastor, but God, said, hey, this is what I want you to do, and I resisted it and finally, followed him in that. And so I was a student pastor for the first 11, 12 years of my ministry career and did student ministry and college ministry. And then when I was 33, we started Crosspoint, my wife and I. That was the age of Jesus, by the way. That's when he died, actually. I don't know if that's a good analogy. But I was 33 when we started Crosspoint, and we just wanted to create a place for people, a lot of our friends that didn't have a place to go to kind of begin faith and explore faith and ask questions and move at their own pace and without sifting through all the religious lingo and stuff. And so, things kind of took off and we're going really well. And on the surface, by all the metrics, things look good as a startup and the progress that we were making. And we sent out a couple new churches over the first number of years. And, we were even, as we were heading toward, the latter part of right before 2020, getting ready to campus and things were just kind of humming along. And that was all on the surface, but there were deeper places in my life where kind of my discipleship or apprenticing wasn't really being touched by what I was doing and how I was connecting with Jesus. And so when the pandemic hit right after that, that was like a jolt. And I actually did pretty well in the early part of the pandemic because I love moments where we have to pivot and do different things, new things, and innovating and all of that. And so for the first year or so, I did well. Where I didn't do so well is when we hit year 2 and 3 of the tail of that, and it just kept going. And then I found myself beginning to be racked with anxiety. And this is where some of those empty places really began to kind of emerge. And I had taught even many times on Jesus's teachings on worry. In fact, my first sermon I ever did when I was 20 years old was on worry. And yet that was so foreign to me in that season. And I was not in a good mental health space. I wasn't happy. And not that happiness is the main thing, but I will be honest, I do think that there's something about not being grouchy and depressed all the time. In fact, I know there's a thing about not being that way. And so I was just not well on a number of levels. And I was on track, in my humble opinion, to kind of be a failure in my marriage. And I was feeling a sense of that might bleed over into being a failure as a parent. And I just felt stuck. And so the problem in that season was, it wasn't that I didn't want to change. It wasn't even that I wasn't trying to change. I did want to change. I was trying really hard, but I didn't fully know how to change. And at that same time, I was kind of becoming really disillusioned with being a pastor. And I realized, because see, here's the thing. You can be super successful as a pastor and yet be really tore up and not in a good place, in the inner part of your life. And so, I wasn't alone in that. I began to realize a lot of people were in similar places. And I hated this phrase. You've probably heard it. As goes the leader, so goes the church. I hated that. Because I'm oh gosh, I'm in such a bad place. I don't want people following me and being like me. I don't want to be around a bunch of people like me. That'd be horrible. That'd be bad for everybody. So that was just a really unique time. And I began to realize as I kind of began to make some progress out of that, which I'll talk about in a moment. Crosspoint would always been kind of a church for people that are newer to faith and exploring Jesus. We still are. We really try to create a place where you can begin. But we also, at that point, had a number of people who had been in church for a number of years. All right, 8 years, been with us 10 years, maybe even previous to us, and yet still were perhaps not fully transformed. Like cleaned up on the outside, like knocked all the rough edges off. I mean, kind of look and act like we have it together, even though we're a church where it's okay not to have it together. But you like start kind of feeling like you're on top of life. But transformed from the inside out is an entirely different thing. And, like living the countercultural way of Jesus and kind of emulating the character of Jesus. And some people, sure, but I mean, that was kind of a minority. And so, fast forward a bit, I discovered, over the last year, I just began to realize that many of you were hitting the same wall. And again, it's not that you didn't want to change or you weren't trying to change, you did. In fact, you were even working on it, but oftentimes we just don't know how. And so I began to make some changes. One of the big ones that really created a massive change of trajectory was a book that my wife recommended called The Ruthless Implementation of Hurry, by John Mark Comer. And she had been recommended this book, started reading it. She said, you really need to read this book. And I didn't know why, but I started reading about 3 pages in. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my life right here. And that book, he's actually, John Mark is the guy that wrote this journey that we're doing right now. So, I mean, this is the foundation for what we are embarking on right now. And I started therapy, and that was super big as well. And many of you kind of have heard pieces of that. You know that. What you probably don't know is the stuff we're talking about last week, this week, next week, really throughout this journey is really a significant part of what's been kind of helping me personally go to some of those new places and allowing that apprenticeship to go to deeper levels. And, I'd always had kind of a devotional life and a prayer life as a pastor. It's like I'm kind of paid to do that. It's like I got to do that. And so many times it was obligatory, but I would do it. I'd be like, hey, I did my devotions, and my attitude sucks, and I kicked the dog on the way out the door, but by God, I prayed on the way out today, so it was good. But it didn't really set deeply, but I'm telling you, over the last year or two, as I've been really digging into some of these things like solitude and quietness and prayer and reflection and Sabbath and creating spaces. And listen, I'm not even 50% of the way there. I bat maybe 33% right now on all of it. But I'm telling you, it's begun to change me. And to the extent that almost every day in my gratitude journal, when I write my gratitude journal, I'll say something like, oh my gosh, God, I hope I never lose the fervor for this time that we have every day. Like, I love it so much. It's so life-giving. I hope it never gets dull. And so that took me to year 48. It took me 48 years to get to that point. So if you're kind of like, gosh, I'm not there, there's a lot of grace there. I thank God there's still grace for me on that front. But I share all that because I want you to know what we're doing over these weeks really can take us to some of those places if you identify with any of that. And so I want to download for you kind of this next phase that we're going to explore together this weekend. And kind of the insider lingo we've been looking at in terms of how we change to become more like Jesus is this idea of spiritual formation. And Dallas Willard, who's kind of this guru on the inner life, spiritual inner life over the last century, he says this. He says, spiritual formation in the Christian tradition, which is that's a really important delineation, is a process of increasingly becoming possessed and permeated by the character traits of Jesus as we walk in the easy yoke. A yoke is a teaching or a way of discipleship with Jesus, our teacher. And so here's kind of the key idea that I really want us to grasp and understand when it comes to spiritual formation. Spiritual formation is not a Christian thing, all right? It's a human thing, all right? Humans just naturally form and change, all right? And so you've been spiritually formed since before your very first breath, all right? Spiritual formation begins in utero. I mean, it happens, all of our days of our life. But I mean, think about this. Like Mother Teresa, she was formed from the very first parts of her life. All right. I mean, people like Hitler was spiritually formed from before he even breathed his first breath. I mean, people like Queen Elizabeth, she was spiritually formed. People like Osama bin Laden. I mean, I'm going all over the board on some of these. I mean, all these people were spiritually formed. Their spirits were formed over a long period of time through a very complex array of dynamics from genetic inheritance, family patterns, childhood wounds, habits, decisions, relationships, experiences. The same is true for you and for me. I mean, you and I are constantly being formed, and it will continue to be that way. So all that to say, spiritual formation really is not optional. All right? It just naturally happens. And the question is, are we being formed more in the character of Jesus, or are we being formed in the character of something or someone else? Because we're all in the process of being formed. Now, in the New Testament, there's kind of a definition or a description that helps us see how this works. And this is the Apostle Paul in Romans, and he's writing to first century Christians in Rome, and here's what he says. You may have heard this before. He says, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, I want you to notice there are two verbs right here, conform and transformed, and these both come from the same Greek root word, which is the word metamorpheo. Metamorpheo is where we get the word metamorphosis, which is like the process that a caterpillar goes through when it goes from a caterpillar and turns into a butterfly. And so this is kind of the word picture that the Apostle Paul gives us on how we're spiritually formed and the depth of change that's possible within our souls. And it's not just like some human behavior modification, but it's actually like a change in heart. Now, the other important thing to understand right here is in the Greek, these two words, conform and transform, these are in the passive present tense. And what that means is that they are something that's already happening to you. All right, meaning that you are already either being conformed to the patterns of the world, or you are in the process of being transformed into more and more the likeness of Jesus, but there's not a plan C. It's either one or the other. We're all heading in one direction or the other. And so the problem, again, is so much of our formation that happens to us is unintentional. We even know that it's happening. Like nobody sits down one day and says, oh man, I want to conform to the patterns of the world, right? I want to be more bitter and more angry and hate people more and be more selfish, and resentful. It just happens. It just naturally happens. If you live in a certain parts of the country, say New York City or Los Angeles, even that environment alone is going to shape you and form you. I don't know if you've ever thought about that before. In fact, I want you to hear the story of a pastor who recently moved to New York City that's a part of this journey and how he began to experience that environment actually changing him.
When I first moved to New York City, one of the things I noticed was how much the city itself shaped me. New York is a formation machine. It affects your level of aggression. It affects the pace at which you walk. In fact, sociologists tell us that if you live in New York for a while, you will actually begin to walk faster than people in other cities. The stories of New York, the architecture of New York, the history of New York all work on you subtly and slowly, where when you go back and visit your families for the holidays, they often say, what's happened to you? And the answer is, New York has happened to me. But you're never really aware of it in any given moment. And I think that's such an important recognition for me as a pastor, because so often people are naive and they think, I'm not being shaped by anything. Sometimes non-Christians say, I don't want to follow Jesus. I don't want to be formed by religion. But the truth is, we're all being formed by something. The question's not, shall someone form me? The question is, who will form me? The question is not, who do I want to become? The question is, who am I becoming by the forces that are working on me? And I think Paul really understood the importance of making our formation conscious. He said to the Romans in Romans 12, do not be conformed to the image of this world. Why? Because that's what it does. He wanted the Christians in Rome to recognize and understand how Rome was shaping them into Romans. The stories of Rome, the religion of Rome, the architecture of Rome, the practices of what it meant to participate in the empire were making them Romans. So they had to discern their formation so they could be transformed. And this is what Jesus wants us to do, to figure out who Jesus is and how his story, his truth, his love, and his practices form us into his disciples. So the great question is not, shall I be formed? The question is consciously determining who it is that will form you.
Love that. Have you ever thought about that? The question's not, shall I be formed? The question is, who and what is actually forming me? This week, we're actually going to identify these things. We're actually going to identify and name and spend some time reflecting on the things that are actually forming us and deforming us. And I want to introduce us to a paradigm before we kind of dig into that that's called the unintentional spiritual formation paradigm. Because, for a lot of us, we don't even know that it's happening, and yet how we become, who we become, is kind of a secret mystery to the human soul. And this is kind of crazy because, among some of the brightest minds in both, the spiritual realms and the scientific realm, it's pretty cool because they basically agree that there are 6 factors that shape who we are as human beings. And so I want to kind of unpack these for us, and we're going to spend some time in our guide this week actually reflecting on how each of these realms actually impact our lives. But first, let me explain them to you. The first one is this. First realm that we're shaped by is our habits. All right, and that's not a surprise, right? There's tons of research and study on the power of habit. In fact, there's a book by that name. It's a great read if you haven't read that. Aristotle, the philosopher, once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." All right? Meaning, if you're reading the news or doom scrolling on, the social medias or going to the gym, whatever you're doing, you are those things. And so our habits, what happens is they get into the core of our being and they begin to shape your loves and your longings. All right? Your loves and your longings is actually what the New Testament refers to as your heart. All right? It'll talk about your heart, protect your heart. Well, it's actually your loves and your longings. Now, for example, I did not grow up. You see me, I got a cup of coffee up here. I did not grow up loving coffee. In fact, I didn't even grow up liking coffee, if I'm honest. When I first got my first ministry job, all the youth pastors in my area, they're always like, hey, let's go grab a cup of coffee. Let's go get coffee. So I started going to coffee, and I almost felt like I had to drink it. So, I'd get it, and I'd be like pouring sugar, and I'd be pouring like chocolate and cream and even more whipped cream on top. I'm like, okay, it's good. I like it. I couldn't even taste the coffee, right? But this crazy thing began to happen. All right, what began to happen is at first I was like, oh man, this is so gross. I like sugar, so I'll sugar it all up, right? I'll sugar it all up. But then before long, I'm like, okay, this isn't bad. And then, a short time later, I started going, okay, I kind of like this. In fact, then I go, okay, let me try this. Let me just try this with a little less sugar right now. And then before long, I was like drinking it without any sugar and any, like dairy or anything in it. And all of a sudden I go, oh my gosh, I began to change. I introduced it to my wife, by the way, and she fell in love with it too. And then she went the same direction. She's like, it is sure good you're not a crack dealer because you would so have me hooked on drugs if coffee was crack. Like, you totally hooked me on this. And so I just became the kind of person that had longings and loves directed at coffee. And you go, okay, well, how did that happen? Well, it happened day by day by day. It happened simply by me waking up every morning and having a cup of coffee. And now, you know what happens now? I spend a ridiculous amount on coffee every week. Ridiculous amount. I ship coffee in. We're coffee snobs. We ship it in from San Francisco. We love blue bottle coffee. We ship it in. We don't brew it. It's a whole process. Every morning it's grinding the beans. We do pour-overs. We got a whole contraption for pour-overs. Heating the water, pouring over yourself. My kids even bought me a pour-over to travel with. It's an addiction, if I'm honest, all right? And it's a daily ritual that started because I fell in love with coffee. Now, here's the thing. This is what's interesting, and this is how habits work. All right, in my mind, I know I'm terrible. Coffee isn't the best for me. It's kind of not real good. It's kind of terrible, in fact. I went off caffeine a few times for like a couple months at a time. I was like a better person. I slept better. I was more focused, like I had more energy. And so I don't drink coffee because I read in a blog, hey, you should do this. I just drink coffee because I love it. That's why I drink coffee. And yet the reality is, when it comes to the things that we love, these things shape our habits, right? That has a far greater effect on your life than what you know to be true in your mind. And so, it's easy to think, hey, I'm just watching and binging on Netflix, or I'm just, checking email late at night. Got to make sure before I put my head on my pillow, there's nothing that came in. Or I'm just buying another pair of shoes. But at the end of the day, we're turning this invisible fulcrum of our heart in a certain direction, and we're beginning to become a certain type of person. So that's habits. Habits shape us. Here's the second one. The second one, this is another no-brainer for us, relationships. We know this. You become like the people you spend time with, right? In fact, odds are you probably dress like the group of people that you spend time with. You probably started talking like them. You think like them. You even might vote like them. You probably spend money like them. You view the world the way that they view the world over time. You are even becoming like them. And I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing. It probably depends on what kind of person they are. We've always kind of said, if you want to know how a person is, we've told our kids this. We wanted to know kind of where your life is headed, we look at your friends, all right? Because that says a lot about us. So we know that one. Here's another fascinating realm that influences and shapes our lives. The stories that we tell and the stories that we believe. I don't know if you realize this. God hardwired us to search for meaning. We're the only created being that does this. And we take all these data points, these things we experience in life, and we actually turn them into a story, a narrative to live in and to live out of. This is one of the reasons we love movies. It's one of the reasons we love TV shows. It's why we love novels. This is why we do this At the Movie series every year, where we look at some of these big movies that hit the big screen, because we're drawn to these narratives, these stories, and we want to find out where we are in that story. And so we ask the question, okay, what does this say about God and his stories? Sometimes they're congruent. Sometimes God tells a different story than some of the stories that our culture tells. In fact, Babette Buster, she's a screenwriter. She calls human beings narrative animals. She's like, we're like an animal. We love narratives. And so these stories that we grab onto, they tell us what the good life looks like. They tell us what success looks like. They tell us what makes us happy. They tell us, how to get more purpose. And they shape us. In fact, the stories that we give energy to, that they shape the thousands of decisions we make every day about whether or not we're going to stay in our marriage, or how we're going to spend our money, or how we're going to spend our time, or how much time we're going to spend working. And so we have to be aware, how are the stories that I'm choosing to believe and impacting me? So you got stories, you got habits, you got relationships. All of these come out of an environment. That might be a small town. You might be a suburb person. You could be in the big city, kind of like we heard from John a moment ago. I mean, crazy that the place that we live, we actually become like that place. And the other thing we have to think about here is that, it's 2025, and so we live in a digital world. And so what that means is we live in two places at once, meaning we have our physical location where we physically are planted, but we also have our digital location that we live in the echo chamber of all the algorithms that define our digital home. And that could be good, that could be bad. It depends on what your algorithms are. But again, we become like our environment. So these forces all work over time. And they sneak up, and they have this cumulative effect. And one day we wake up and we go, oh my gosh, I've changed. I'm an entirely different people. These things have shaped me, changed me. And there's kind of a synergistic energy around this. I mean, all these things kind of collaborate and they form us. And it doesn't just happen in one moment. It's like a slow burn over time. But what happens over time is this happens through our experiences. And so, the one massive place that our experience shapes us is our family of origin. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen in our family of origin that shape the rest of our life. There's a lot of things from our childhood that shape the rest of our life. And that's also true, with the significant experiences in the rest of our life. Whether I go to college, whether I drop out of high school, whether I get my dream job or I file for bankruptcy, whether I get married or stay single. The point is all of this has an effect on you. And all you have to do is wake up in the morning. You don't have to be strategic. All you have to do is get up and start living. It requires no strategery. That's a new word I'm making up today, strategery. There's no strategic planning that is required. You just get up and all of this begins to shape and form us. Which is why this paradigm is called unintentional spiritual formation. So the question again isn't, are you becoming someone? All right, the question is, who or what are you becoming based on all of these factors? Now, we're gonna unpack this week. This is gonna be a really, really cool week. In fact, I want to give you a moment to start this right now in our service. And so if you're tuning in online and you haven't got a journal yet, we're gonna put the QR code up for that right now. For those of you in the room, if you have your guide, I want you to go ahead and take that out. Turn to page 16. If you don't have your guide, I'm gonna walk you through. You might just take your device with you and just make some notes, and I'm gonna kind of tell you what you can reflect on. You can apply that to your journal later. But this week, we're going to think through those 5 areas, those 6 areas that strategically shape shape us in a very unintentional way. And this is going to be the biggest lift of the entire journey. This week's work in the guide is going to be the biggest lift because you're going to have 5 different realms that you're going to process. All right, and so I want you to begin on page 17, if you turn to your guide there, and I want you to think about habits. All right, and so what habits make up your everyday life? And if you don't have your guide, I'm going to read this for you. What are the activities in your typical workday that are habitual? What's your afternoon rhythm look like? What's your evening rhythm look like? What activities do you do on a typical weekend? And how do you think these habits are shaping you as a person? And then if you have your guide, you can turn to page 22, and there's a whole bunch of adjectives that will describe and feelings that will describe, okay, are these some of the things that I'm feeling? Are they fruit I want, or are they fruit that I don't want? Because we all go through stick seasons. We all go through seasons where we have to get through, and we find coping mechanisms, and we allow things to actually begin to shape us. So as you spend a little time reflecting on that, we're going to give you a little space. Band's going to give you a background track while you're doing that. So here's Kyle on the band as you work through page 17 and talk about, okay, how are these habits unintentionally shaping my life? Oh, how often do you get some backtrack music like that while you do a little reflection? That's like sitting on the Commons during the week and just working, having some great music right there. Hey, it's going to be a big week. Hopefully you identified some things, some of the ways your habits actually are unintentionally shaping parts of your day. There's going to be 5 different initiatives, 5 formation audits that you're going to be doing in your guide this week as a part of your homework. And so again, this is we're going to have some massive discoveries this week. I think we're going to see some things. We're going to go, oh my gosh, I had no idea that each of these realms were shaping me the way that they are. And this is a part of us actually growing more in the likeness of Jesus, because we have to understand what the unintentional formation is before we can begin to get intentional. So I think one of the things that's going to happen is we're going to find ourselves in a bit of tension this week. I think we're going to find ourselves in a bit of struggle because we're going to realize, gosh, I thought I was a little more in control of this than perhaps I am, and you're going to feel some internal tension. I want you to embrace that. In fact, I love what Brant Hansen in his book, Blessed Are the Misfits, says about this. He says, it's striking how often people think that long-standing, ongoing struggle against a particular temptation, maybe something that's drawing me away from more and more of God, or more and more of his goodness, or more and more of his peace, how that particular temptation means that they are somehow failing. He says, no, you're not failing. The struggle actually means God is working in you. I love that. Love that. Well, what he's saying is don't stop struggling. All right, you should actually expect some struggle this week. All right, as you begin to go from being conformed into the likeness of the world and culture and resentment and anger and bitterness, you're going to feel some struggle as you begin to move into a transformational place of becoming more in the likeness of Jesus. In fact, Jesus, he went through this. I mean, before his crucifixion, it says that we know Jesus struggled himself, actually wanting to do the very thing that God, he knew God, his Father, wanted him to do. Another guy, the Apostle Paul, we look at pretty regularly around here, he extensively talks about this ongoing struggle with these desires that constantly pull him away. Just remember that the struggle, Paul would struggle, fail, struggle again. I mean, and you and I, we're going to do the same. You know why? Because it's the ongoing effort that honors God, right? The struggle means that God is still working. Now, I want to give you one of my favorite verses. It's one I write every single day. You've heard this many times, but I want to give you, as you go into this week, this reminder right here. It comes from this author in the Old Testament, and he's kind of lamenting on life and his struggle. And he says this. He says, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new, get this, every single morning. Every time that sun comes up, there are fresh mercies and graces waiting on you. And then he ends up by saying, man, God, you are so faithful. You are so great. You are so good to me. See, here's the good news. That is a doubly instructive verse right there, meaning he doesn't say that the struggles are gone. He doesn't say the issues are gone. You know what he says? He says, I actually have a hope because God's mercies for me are brand new every single day as I work to grow in becoming more like the person that Jesus wants me to be. So again, I think we're going to have some big discoveries this week. I think we're going to have some moments where we're going to be in a struggle, and we got to push through that. That actually means God is working in you. Now, before we close this weekend, I want to kind of root us in a practice again before we go that will just remind us and give us something tangible, something we can actually do that Jesus, calls us to, this ancient practice that we're going to share. And again, people who have been running after the heart of God have been doing this for thousands of years. They've shared in this meal called the Eucharist. Some call it the Mass, the Lord's Supper, the Holy Communion. They're all one and the same. And, some of you, if you're newer to Crosspoint, you might be going, okay, can I do this? I mean, is it cool to do this here? I'm not a member here. You can do this. This isn't our table. There's no restrictions on this table. It's actually God's table. And so we have open communion here at Crosspoint. Jesus doesn't even really give all that much instruction other than he says, hey, I want you to do this to remember me and remember what I did on your behalf. And so this is a way for us to connect. It's a practice for us to connect and remember tangibly, and with all of our senses. It's a great way to connect with Jesus. And so if you're tuning in at home, you can grab something to eat, bread, cracker, something to drink. Whatever you have available is totally cool. God understands. I think anything works in this moment because Jesus just picked up normal items off the table. Now, so many times we look at our struggle or our circumstances we're going through to kind of say, okay, is God with me? Is God happy with me? Does God care for me? Does he see me? That's looking in the wrong place. We say this, pretty regularly around here. Where do we look to know if God loves us? We look at a single event that took place outside the walls of Jerusalem back in the first century, where Jesus, came to do something on your and my behalf that we couldn't do for ourselves, where he didn't have to. I mean, he chose to do this on our behalf to not only take our guilt and our shame away, but to take our sin away. And it's almost like he wanted to remove every obstacle that was in the way of us connecting and experiencing more and more of God's goodness in our lives, that we could have fellowship with God, we could experience his unconditional love. And so he instituted this little meal, this moment, to help us remember what he did for us on our behalf. And so I want to read to you from the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew says, while they were eating, Jesus took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it. He gave it to the disciples, saying, take and eat, this is my body. And then he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. So we're going to share in this practice today, and you can choose if you want to participate in this or not. We're going to share in the bread and the cup, and so for some of us, you've done this before. For some of you may do this for the very first time. You may be moving toward God and saying, I want to taste and I want to experience God's goodness, his grace. This may be that expression for you for the first time. Of celebrating what God's done for you. Or maybe you're going to take this as a way of expressing that I'm moving that direction, and Jesus, I want more of you in my life. This is for anyone who wants to celebrate God's goodness and remember his grace and his love. So let me pray for us, and then we're going to share this. Heavenly Father, thank you for inviting us, including us, believing in us. We've always heard it's about a belief in you, which is a part of it, but it's also about you believing in us. And so as we share in this moment, I pray that you would just give us a confidence of the love that you have for us. This week, we're going to look at and unpack all the ways that things in this world and culture shape our lives and influence us. And it's going to be a heavy lift. And so I just pray that you would build us up a bit in this moment, that you would remind us of your grace and your faithfulness, and that you have new mercies waiting for us every single day. Thank you for being a God who pursues us. We love you, and we thank you. Amen. Let's go ahead and stand. The band's going to do a song here in a moment, and as they do, you are welcome to come down the aisles and make your way, if you would like, to the tables here at the front corners of the stage. There's a piece of bread and there's a cup, and so you're going to take the piece of bread and you're going to dip it in the cup. We're dippers, not sippers, just so you know. Dippers, not sippers. And you can take a moment there if you would like. You can dip, and then you can walk back to your seat, take whatever time you want, but I want to encourage you to celebrate the love, this practice that God gave us to experience and take in and be reminded of the love that he has for us. Because there's a name that can silence the roaring waves. There's a name that can empty out the grave, and it's Jesus. This is what we're celebrating, and he's a healer, and he wants to actually take us to deeper places. So let's sing, and let's come and celebrate what he's done for us at the table.
Thanks so much for joining us today. take a moment to follow our podcast on your preferred platform, and be sure to download our app to stay informed on everything happening here at Crosspoint. And if you like what you heard today, don't hesitate to share it with a friend that might need to hear it too.